Hello guys, today we are going to the movie review. Movie name is Caligula 1979. Movie is a highly controversial and infamous film directed by Caligula with the screenplay by Vidal. It is known for its explicit content combining historical drama with graphic sense of sexuality and voice. The film's attempts to depict the rise and renaissance of the Roman Empire, Caligula's exploring themes of power, corruption, and decadence. Review highlighting performance. I tell you this movie's review highlighting and performance. Malcolm McDowell delivers a compelling portrayal of Caligula, capturing the emperor descent into madness and excess. The supporting cast includes notable performance, though some critics found the acting unview. Director and cinematography. The film's direction is ambitious, aiming for provocations and visually striking representation of ancient Rome. However, its explicit scenes often overshadow the narratives and artistic intent, leading to mixed reactions, content, and controversy. Caligula is infamous for its explicit sexual content, including unsimulated scenes and graphic violence. This has led to widespread censorship and bans in various countries. The film's explicit nature has overshadows its historical storytelling, making it a controversial piece in film history. Themes and interpretations. While some view it as a critique of absolute power and decadence, others see it as exploration. The film's blend of historical elements with explicit content has sparked debates about artist expressions versus gratuitous critics' reception. The film's reviewed largely negative review from mainstream critics at the time of release, citing its explicit context and unviewed storytelling. However, it has gained a cult following among fans of controversial cinema and exploitation films overall. Caligula 1979 remains as a polarizing film as education's attempts at a historical drama that often overshadowed by its nudity and explicit scenes. It's a film that should be approached with caution, understanding its controversial nature and context of its productions more. So I tell this movie in depth review of Caligula 1979. Introductions and background. Caligula is one of the most notorious film in cinematic history, primarily due to its explicit content, controversial productions background, and the provocative approach taken by its creators. The film was commenced by Bob Cusio, the founder of Panthos Meganis, who envisioned its ends as an artist and erotics portrayals of ancient Rome with the goals of pushing boundaries and challenging censorships. The project was initially conceived as a serious historical drama but eventually became a notorious amalgamations of art, pornography, and explanations. The film was directed by Tinto Brass, an acclaimed Italian filmmaker known for his work in the erotic genres, but it was ultimately taken over and re-edited by producer George Vidal and others involved in the productions. The screenplay based on the title Life of Caligula, the third Roman emperor, aimed to depict this rise to power, his trainer, and his descent into madness, but it is widely remembered for its explicit scenes that go far beyond traditional historical storytelling. Plot overview. The film begins with Caligula ascension to power following the death of Tiberius, portraying him as a charismatic but increasingly erratic ruler. As the consolidated power he includes in extreme acts of sexual perversity, violence, and cruelty. The narrative loosely follows historical events but is heavily functionalized and sensationalized, emphasizing themes of decades, corruption, and absolute power. Corruption absolutely thought the film Caligula's behavior become more erratic and depraved, culminating in acts of violence, betrayals, and the films explore his relationship with various characters, including his sister Drusilla, his favorite, and ultimately his downfall. The film's climax revolves around his violent and tragic end, leading to chaos. Each room performance and cast this movie. Malcolm's MC Dovans as Caligula's MC Don's portrayal is intense and layered, capturing the imperial transformation from a seemingly leaders to a made trend. His performance is sometimes praised for it. Commitment, thought some critics find it overshadowed by the film's sensationalist content. Other cast members, the supporting cast includes Terrence and Sarah Peters, O'Toole Jones, Caligula, and Helen Mirren, among others. Many of these performances are overshadowed by the film's explicit scenes. Some actors have expressed discomfort with the materials, artists, and aspects, directions, and cinematography. Tinto Brass directions aimed for a loose, visually striking depiction of ancient rooms. The film features elaborate sets, costumes, and cinematography that evoke the grandeur of the empire, however, that focus on explicit scenes of dirty strength from the historical and artistic elements, leading to a cheering viewing experience. visual styles. The film employs a mix of classicals and modern cinematic techniques, sometimes blending grandeur with shock value. Its aesthetic choices are polarizing. Some see it as attempts at high art while others view it as exploitative con- controversy and content. Caligula is infamous for its explicit content, including un- unsuspectingly graphic scans, including non-simulated acts, scans of violence, torture, and cruelty, depictions for of rape and other violence. These scans were a major cause of censorship bans and protest upon release. The film's explicitness led many to consider it more an exploration film than a serious historical drama. The controversy surrounding the film has overshadowed its artistic ambitions, making it symbol of cinematic boundary pushing at censorship battle. I tell you this themes and interpretations, power and corruption. At its core, Caligula attempts to explore how absolute power corruptions absolutely the characters descent into madness and deprecably it depicted as a consequence of unchecked authority, decadence and excess. The film vividly portrays the decadence of Rome's imperial decadence. It's emphasizing the hedonistic lifestyle of Caligula and his court often equating scams with moral decay. Psychology decline. Some interpret the film as psychology study of ruler losing touch with reality, driven by paranoia, megalomania, and a desire for absolute control. Artistic versus critics and audience. Critics and audience debate whether the film is serious artistic statement or simply a vehicle for shock and titillations. Many believe the explicit scans undermines and potentially for meaningful commentary, while others argue that they serve to reveal the corruption and nature of power. Critics' reception. Initial receptions when released, Caligula was met with shock, outrage, and condemnation from critics, religious groups, and censors worldwide. Its explicit content led to bans in many countries, and it was often labeled as exploitative and censors worldwide. Its explicit content led to bans in many countries, and it was often labeled as exploitative and tasteless. Modern perspective. Over time, some cinephiles and scholars have revisited Caligula as a controversial piece of cinema, analyzing its themes, productions, history, and cultural significance. It has gained a culture following among fans of extreme and transgressive films, appreciated for its academically and historical audacity. Criticism. Mainstream critics have generally dismissed Caligula, citing its explicit scans as gratuitous and its storytelling as lacking coherence. Its reputation is marked by the perception that it prioritizes our substance praise. Some have appreciated it as a bold event-grand experiment and cinema that challenge conventional boundaries, viewing it as films that pushes the involve of artist expressions, productions, and legacy. The story of Caligula production is scandalous as the film itself. It was intentionally conceived as a serious historical drama but was heavily edited and removed under Vidal supervision. The film's production was plagued by financial problems, legal issues, and dispute among the creators, leading to a disjointed final product. The film's legacy is complex. It is often cited as an example of artist public exploitation and censorship battle. It has influenced the genres of transgressive cinema and remains a controversial milestone in film history. Final thought. Caligula 1979 is a film that defines easy classifications. It is a visually opulent, morally provocative, and ethically contentious film that has left a lasting impact due to its explicit content and controversial production history. Whether regarded as a failed artistic experiment, a piece of exploration cinema, or a provocative statement on power, it undoubtedly remains one of the most talked about films of the 20th century. So, guys, I try to use other deep. So, continue with me. I tell this an extensive and in depth review of Caligula 1917 introduction and historical context. Caligula stands as one of the most controversial films ever made, infamous for its explicit content and tumultuous production history. The film was conceived during a period of cinematic experiment in the late 20th century, a time when filmmakers and producers were increasingly pushing boundaries to challenge censorship law and explore two subjects. The film's original tracks back to a desire to create a serious and artistic portrayal of the Roman Emperor Caligula, a ruler often remembered for his cruelty, madness, and decadence. The project was originally intended by Bob Jusio, the flamboyant publisher of Panthers magazine, who envisaged it as highbrow erotic epic that would blend historical drama with explicit scenes. His goal was to produce a film that would shock audience, challenge censorship, and elevates erotic cinema to a new level of artistic legitimacy. To achieve this, Usha enlisted the acclaimed Italian filmmakers into brass, known for his erotic films such as Sloane Kitty and Black Angels. Prowse was initially here to direct the project with a more serious tone. However, the film's production son spread into chaos, with Gore visually stepping in to write the screenplay and take over creative control. The film was shot in Italy with lavish sets and costumes aiming to evoke the grandeur of ancient Romans, yet the project was plagued with financial defiance, creative cluster, and legal issues, ultimately resulting in a disjointed production that became infamous not only for its explicit scenes but also for its troubles and scandalous productions plot, summary, and narrative. Caligula loosely follows the historical figure change Julius Caesar Germanism, known as Caligula, from his rise to power to his eventually downfall. The film begins with Caligula ascension following the death of Tiberius, emphasizing his charismatic yet increasingly un- unhinged personally as a concentrated power. The narrative explores his descent into madness, cruelty, and sexual depravity. The film depicts key events in Caligula regions such as his lavish banquets, cruel executions, and exploits. The story explores his relationship with various characters, including his sister Drusilla, whom the seduces and manipulates, as well as his advisors, censor, and subjects. Throughout the film's Caligula's behavior becomes more erratic, violent, and unpredictable, symbolizing the corrupting influence of absolute power. The narrative culminates in his brutal assumptions, followed by chaos and anarchy in Rome. The film attempts to portray the psychologically unraveling of Caligula as a reflection of the corrupting influence of unchecked authority, although its heavy reliance to shocking imagery often called it historical and thematic intentions, performance, and cast. Malcolm's M.C. Dowles as Caligula. M.C. Dowles delivers an intense and committed performance, capturing the complex, vulnerable nature of the emperor. His portrayals oscillates between charm and menace, embodying the productivity qualities for a ruler driven by desires, paranoia, and madness. Despite the controversial nature of the role, MC Dole's acting is often regarded as the film's strongest elements, providing a compelling core amid the chaos. Teresa Annis's own as Ursula's heavy performance is notable for its sensuality and emotionally depth, portraying Drusilla as a both victim and participant is her brother decades Peter O'Toole's as a pro-head, O'Toole's brand appearance as a pro-head offers a moment of philosophical reflections aims the chows editing a layer of historical gravitas. Helen's Mirre and Jones Gailute both actors deliver polished performance, but their contributions are overshadowed by the film's explicit content and sensationalism. The supporting cast includes many notable actors, but their performances are often marred by the film's disjointed tone and explicit scenes which many viewers find distraction or explorative. Artist elements and cinematic style, direction and visually aesthetic into brass directions aim to evoke the grandeur and decades on of ancient Rome thought elaborate sets, costume and cinematography. The film features wide shot of opulent place, bustling streets and detailed shows, horticulture designed to immerse viewers in its historical setting. Cinematography. The films employ as a lush theatrical style with vibrant colors and dramatic highlighting to emphasizing the opulence of the imperial court. Some skins are shot with a classic aesthetic remains of Renaissance paintings, while others veer into more experimental or surreal territory. Music and score. The soundtracks blends period appreciate music with modern compositions, occasionally using discrete or perfection sounds of to heighten the film's unsettling atmosphere. Explicit skin. The most controversial aspect of the film is explicit sexual content, which includes unsimulated sex, BDSM, and scans of sexual violence. These scans are often shot in clinical or voyeuristic manners, emphasizing sex and realism, controversy, and censorship. Caligula becomes notorious for its explicit content, leading to censorship bans and protests worldwide. Many countries refuse to release the films or heavily edited it for theatrically screenings. The explicit scans, including non-conjugation acts, rape, and orgies, generated outrage from religious groups, critics, and the general public. The film's production was also marred by legal dispute and financial scandals, with some claiming that the people's film shocking scans were edited without the director's consent or knowledge. Core visual who has thought it in as the screenwriting later distanced himself from the final product, criticizing its impact on censorship and free expression. Caligula became a touchstone. It debates our artistic freedom and censorship exemplify how boundaries pushing content can provoke societal backlash. It also raised questions about the exploitations of actors and the ethics of filmmaking. Such explicit scans thematic analysis power and corruption. The films explore how absolute power can corrupt the human soul, leading to cruelty, decades, and madness. Caligula's character embodies his descent as his initial charm devolves into tyranny and depravity, sexuality, and decadence. The films unbasically depicts sexuality as a tool of power and manipulations, emphasizing the hedonism of the Roman elite. It portrays sex as both as an of liberation and a means of control, often linked to violence, madness, and psychological decay. The film suggests that Caligula's madness is both a personal psychology breakdown and reflection of the corruption society around his name. Hallucinations, paranoia, and violent outbursts despite the destructive effect of the absolute power. Historical accuracy versus shock value. While claiming to debate historical events, Caligula is widely regarded as a heavily fictionalized and sensationalized account designed to shock and titillate rather than educate. Critics' reception and legacy. In initial reception upon open release, Caligula was met outrage, disgust, and censorship. Critics dismissed it as exploitative and translate as many questioned its artist merit. Cult status over the decades, it has gained a cult following among fans of transgressive and exploitations. Cinema, some scholars and cinephiles view it as a provocative critique of power and decadence, or as an event card experiment that challenge normalized notions of morality and art. Academic and artistic reassessment. Some film critics and historians have revisited Caligula as a symbol of cinematic hubris, censorship battles, and the limits of artistic expressions. At it has been analyzed for its aesthetics, for its production history, and cultural significance. Influence. The film's notoriety has influenced subsequent works in the realm of transgressive cinema and has become a reference point in discussions about the boundaries of artistic freedom. Final evaluations. Caligula 1979 is highly polarizing film that defines traditional cinematic standard. Its combinations of opulent, visually intense performance and explicit content make it unique. It problematic artifact of film history. It's neither a straightforward historical drama or a purely explorative film, but rather a complex and controversial hybrid that raises questions about the nature of art, morality, and censorship for viewers. It's essential to approach Caligula with awareness of its explicit scans and the ethical questions surrounding its production. It remains a provocative, disturbing, and fascinating piece of cinema that continues to spark debates decades after its release. Sorry, guys. An ultra extensive in-depth analysis Caligula 1979. Caligula is arguably one of the most nostalgic films in cinematic history and infamous amalgamations of art, erotic exploitations, and controversy. Its genesis is rooted in the late 20th century culture of boundaries pushing cinema where filmmakers and producers sought to explore to subject and challenge societal norms thoughts of oriented storytelling. The film's origins date back to the early 1970s when Bob Guscio, the flamboyant publishers of Penthouse ma- magazines, envisioned a high art erotic portrayals of ancient rooms that would elevate adult cinema to a level of artistic legitimacy. Guscio believed that historical drafts could be infused with explicit scenes that would shock audience and garner worldwide attention, making a statement about freedom of expression and the limits of censorship. Initially conceived as serious, historically grounded films, Caligula was meant to depict the life and regions of the infamous Roman Emperor Zeus Julius Caesar, Germanism, more commonly known as Caligula, whose region was marked by cruelty, madness, and excess. Zeus' vision was grandiose as films for that would combine produce visually authentic costumes as a compelling narrative. However, the production sons spread into shows the original director into brass, intended to craft a serious and artistic film, but the project was taken over by Gore visually the renowned American writer and intense clerk who was brought in to write an screenplay and exert creative control. Visuals involvement marked a significant shift in the project direction as a sought to incorporate philosophically and political themes, but put the film's explicit contents overshadowed This ambitions the producer was pruned by financial woes, legal dispute, and disputed among the creative teams. Zeus's desire for sensationalism clashed with Fidel's more intellectual approach, leading to a fractured final product. The film was extensively edited with some scans added or altered without the original direction's production approval. The result was a highly controversial film that would ignite debates about censorship, artistic freedom, and exploitations. The film, the plot of Brazil's reimagined of power, decades, and madness, Caligula loosely chronicle and the rise and fall of the Roman Emperor, portraying his ascent to power, his rule marked by excess and cruelty, and his psychologically unraveling. The film begins with Caligula's appointment as emperor after the death of Tiberius, emphasizing his intentionally charm and charisma as he consolidated his authority. His behavior becomes increasingly erratic, violent, and sexually pervasive. The narrative explores key episodes in Caligula's reign, such as his lavish feast and origins, symbolizing decadence, his brutal executions of perceived enemy of traitors, his sexual violence with women, men, and seven family members, most notably his incestuous relationship with his sister Drusilla, his obsessions with power, including acts of cruelty and betrayals, his hallucinations, paranoia, and mental declines, culminating in his violent assumptions. Thoughtful, thought out, the film's Caligula descent into madness is depicted as both a personal psychological breakdown and a reflection of the corrupt decayed society around him. The film is intentionally provocating, emphasizing scans of sexual violence, non-consensual act, and grotesque violence designed to shock and disturb viewers, casting and performance intensity and controversy. Malcolm MC Dovell as Caligula. MC Dovell's portrayal is arguably the most compelling aspect of the film. His intense commitment to the role captures the complex duality of Caligula's charming outright means embodying the imfor tragic descent into madness. Tricia and Seven as Drusilla shows sensually and emotionally charged performance provide as compelling portrayals of Caligula's sister and lover. Her scans with MC Dovans are among the most controversial and talked about moments of the films. Peter's O'Toole as the prohibit O'Toole's brief appearance offer a philosophically counterpoint or to the South, providing a moment of reflection on morality and divine justice. Helen Mirren's and John Chewlan's both actors deliver refined performance that are often obs- overshadowed by the film's explicit sense and sensational tone. Their presence adds a layer of classical gravity to the productions. Other supporting cast, the supporting actor includes a range of talented performers, but their performances are frequently overshadowed by the film's disjointed tone and explicit content. Artistic aspect, visually grandeur and cinematic style. Direction tend to grasp visually styles aim to evoke the grandeur of ancient Rome, thought meticulous at cinematic technique, creating a visually appealing tableaus the contrast sharply with the film's shocking content. Cinematography. The film features sweeping shots of Roman architectural details, palace interiors, and bustling streets designed to impress viewers in its historical setting. The use of dramatic lighting and colors flatness enhance the atmosphere of decadence. Music, the soundtrack blends periods appreciate music with this coordinate modern compositions, night hiding a sense of discussions and discomfort during explicit scans. Explicit content, the film most infamous aspect it is explicit sexual scans which include non included sex, BDSM, and sexual violence. These scans are often shot in a voyeuristic, clinically manner, emphasizing realism and shock value. The controversial censorship, legal battles, and ethically questions Caligula become a lightning rod for controversy upon release. Its explicit scans, including acts of rape, incest, and violence, led to bans, censorship, and protest worldwide. Many countries refused to distribute the film's alternate, and some versions were heavily edited to remove the most graphic content. The production itself was riddled with scandals. Some claim scenes were added for or altered without the directors as consent. The involvement of Jesus Vidal and other creators fractures essential vision, legal disputes over right and distributors delayed the film's release and contributed to its sorting. The critical questions surrounding the films are profound. Wait, guys, for my mouth. The ethical questions surrounding the films are profound, where the explicit scan necessary for artistic expression or where the exploitative Did the actors consent to the most graphic acts? Some actors have spoken about discomfort and curations. It is the film's an artistic critique of power and decadence, or simply a piece of graduation shock cinema, cinematic depth, power, madness, decadence, and morally decay? Power and corruption at its core, Caligula explores how absolute power corruptions absolutely the empire tyrannically rule is debates as both personal psychology, dissent, and societal reflections of decades and moral decay. Sexuality as power, the films emphasizing sexuality as a tool of control, manipulation, and self influence. Its portrayal as inter- intertwined with violence, combinations, and chaos, madness, and psychologically declines. Sylvia's mental deterioration is despite thought, hallucinations, paranoia, and violent outbursts in illustrating how powers can dis- distort reality and lead to self-destruction. Historical versus fictional will claim to debate historical event Caligula as widely regarded as a heavily functionalized, sensationalized account designed to shock rather than educate, decadence and excess. The film visually, the thematically highlighting the skins of imperial rule, equating decades with moral and societal collapse. Critical reception from outrage to cult status. In critical receptions, the film was met with outrage, censorship, and from religious groups, critics, and governments. Its explicit content overshadows any artistic ambitions leading to bans and protests in numerous countries. Modern estimate over the years, Caligula has developed a cult following among fans of transgressive cinema scholars and cinephile appears to its evocative visual styles and provocative themes, viewing it as a challenge to conventional notions of morality and art. Academic perspective, some film scholars analyzing Caligula as critique of power, decadence, and social corruption, while others see as an exploitative film that crossed ethical boundaries. Influence of on cinema, the film has modern resistment over the years. Caligula has developed a cult following among legacy and cultural impact. I tell you this legacy and cultural impact. Caligula remains as a landmark in cinematic history not only for its shocking content but also for its rules, its debates about censorship, artistic expressions, and the ethics of filmmaking. Its troubled productions, controversial content, and subsequent cult status make it a study is in film studies and media ethics. It has inspired humorous parodies, reference, and discussions in popular culture, often cited as an example of the extreme of cinematic experimentation. It's in notorious has cemented its palace as a symbol of artistic rebellion and moral provocations. Final reflection, art, shocks, and ethically boundaries. Caligula is a complex, multifaceted piece of cinema that defies easy classification. It's a simultaneously a visually spectacle, a controversial art piece, and a provocative exploration film. Its legacy is intertwined with broader debates about the boundaries of artistic expressions, censorship, and the ethic of depicting extreme content, whether viewed as a misunderstood masterpiece, a failed experiment, or an exploitative spectacle, climb under Ripley's challenge views to confront uncomfortable questions about power's morality and I tell you this final reflection, art shocks and ethical boundaries. Caligula is a complex, multifaceted piece of cinema that defines easy classification. It is simultaneously visually uh, controversial art piece and provocative explorations. Film its legacy is intertwined peace with border debates about the boundaries of aesthetic, expansive censorship, and the ethics of depicting extreme content. Okay, guys. Next, continue. Okay, the ultimate in-depth exhaustive examination of Caligula 1979. Introduction. The origins in genesis of a cinematic paradox. Okay, there we are. Paradox. And artists despite convince paradox. Caligula stands as one of the most controversial divisions and infamous film in cinematic history. Its multi journey from conceptions of release encapsulates a story of ambitions, excess house, and artistic desperation convinced during an era when filmmakers sought to push the boundaries of censorship and explore to objective subject Caligula embraced as a productions of grandiose visions and profound conflict. The film's origin story begins with Bob Guccius, the flamboyant publicist of Panthers magazine who envisaged a film that will combine historical drama with explicit eroticism, elevating adult cinema beyond mere exploitations. Church's idea was to produce a lavish, high-budget film that would be both art- artistically ambitious and sexually provocative, challenging societal and cinematic norms. He envisioned Caligula as a serious artistic portrait of the infamous Roman emperor, blending authentic period detail with explicit sketches instead to shock and titillate. I initially the project was entrusted to Italian director Tito Brass, renowned for his erotic films such as Saloon Kitty and Black Eagles. Brass was committed to creating a seriously visually stunning film rooted in historical authenticity. However, as productions progresses, creating difference across Lucian's ambitions with sensationalism clashed with brass artistic sensibilities. Enter core visuals, the acclaimed American novelist and essayist who has brought into rework the screenplay and exert creative control. Visuals involvement marked a shift toward a more provocative philosophical explorations of power, decades, and madness, but visions were soon overshadowed by the film's spiraling whose financial difficulties, legal battles, and disputes among the creative team. Uses relentless pursuits of sensational content led to scans being added or alternate without the original directions approvals. The film descended into a fragmented, chaotic productions riddled with controversies about exploration ethics and artistic integrity. The final productions, released in 1979, became a cultural lightning rod, provoking outrage, censorship, and debates worldwide. The narrative and plot of Bray Chen remaining of powers and decadence. Caligula Lossley, Chronicles, the life and legends of Genius Julius Caesar Sermonius Solia focus on his rise to absolute power, his descent into madness, and his violent downfall. The film's narrative is intentionally provocative, emphasizing decades violence and sexual depravity to depict the imperial corruption's opening and rise to power. And the film opens with Caligula's ascension to Emperor following the death of Tiberius, his initial portrayals is charismatic, charming wit, and seemingly benevolent as he begins to consolidate power. His personality shifts dramatically, revealing a dark, more paranoid side. The narrative explores his political mechanism, manipulations, and the intrusive values of absolute authority, the path of into madness. As Caligula as rules progressive, his behavior becomes increasingly irritates, hallucination, paranoia, and violence outbursts become contemplated. His relationships are depicted as luminous and destructive, particularly his incestuous love for his sister sternly portrays as both a victim and an enables for his access thought out. The film's Caligula's appetite is depicted as boundless. He engaged in orgies, seduced women and men, and indulges in BDSM and in incestuous acts. Their scans are often effective, unflinching, and designed to shock. His decadence is symbolism visually lavish banquets had onistic parties and scans of violence, downfall, and assassinations. The narrative culminates in Caligula's violent ascensions and events depicted with brutal realism following his death. Shows Arabs in Rome emphasizing the structure nature of this regime. The film suggests that his madness and excess led of social demonstrations of reflections on the corrupting influence of absolute power. The cast performance of intensity, provoking, and controversy. Malcolm's MC Dawes as Caligula MC Dawes as portrays is raw and compelling. His transformation from a charismatic ruler to a mad warrior tyrant is portrayed with intense, physically and emotionally traditions and Shavio as Drusilla Shavio's portrayals is both sensual and tragic, capturing her character's vulnerability and complexity in Caligula's dictates. Her scans with MC Towns are among the most controversial and discussed part of the film. Peter O'Toole as the prohibited old tools a brief but impactful role offers philosophically commentary or morality, divine justice and corruption, providing a moment of reflective claim amid chaos. Helen's Mirren and John's Gailur's both actors break their signature gravitas, but their performances are often overshadowed by the film's explicit content and sensationalism. Supporting cast. The supporting actors drawn from European cinema lend a veneer of historically authenticity but are often lost aim the film disjointed tones and explicit sense artistic elements and cinematic style visually opulence and extremely techniques directed and visually designed into brass direction emphasizing opulence lavish sets intricate costume and elaborate tableaux evoke the decadence of imperial Rome. The film's visually styles oscillates between classic grandeur and modern experimentalism, often juxtapositions meaningful emergency with shocking contrast cinematography. The cinematography improves swiping, the wide shots, detailed close-ups, and stylizing lighting to evoke a sense of historical authority and theatrically the use of color enhances the opulence and decadence his goals. Reeds and uh, deep shadows underscore the film themes, music and core the soundtrack ambience provide approaches music with different modern compositions creating an unsettling atmosphere. The heightens the shock value of explicit scans the film's most infamous aspect is its unflinching depreciations of and violence scans of non-conclusive act BDSM and sexual violence are shot with clinical realism that aims to provoke visceral reaction. These scans are often controversial because they blur the line between artistic expression and exploration. Controversial censorship and ethical dilemmas. Caligula. Yes, brother. Productions scandalous. Scams added without consent. Reports suggest that some scams, particularly those involving explicit acts, were added or edited without the actor's full consent. Several actors have spoken about discomfort and serious legal battles. The film's distribution was marked by lawsuits, right disputes, and allegations of financial misconduct involving Jews and others involved in productions, directions, and frustrations into brass publicly dishonest of the final cut, lamenting the loss of artistic control. Vidal also distanced himself from the final product, criticizing its graduations, content, ethical and moral questions, explorations versus artificial expansion. What was the explicit content necessary for the film's artistic or thematical goals, or was it merely sensationalism, vectors, warfare, concurrence about treatments of actors during filming, particularly regarding scans of violence and non-conscious act have persisted censorship and artistic freedom. The film's banning and censorship sparked debates about the limits artistic expression. Actors warfare, madness and psychology decay. Caligula mental determination reflection the destructive effects of powers and civilization liberates sympathizing censorship decay polity society visually and thematically the film underscores the decline of societal norms, illustrate how decades leads to chaos and runs, critical reception and cultural legacy from outrage to cult status. Initially outraged, the film was denounced by exploitative immorals and artistically blank ups. Governments and religions grabs its leading to censorship and bans cult following her. Over time, Caligula's change and a cult following among fans of transitive and events guards cinemas. Some viewers and critics regard it as a provocative critique of powers and decadence or as an experimental piece challenging cinematic conventions. Academic researchers, scholars analyzing the film as a reflection of societal fears about totalitarianism, moral decay, and the life limit of artistic expressions, its visual styles and productions. Story are often studied as contemporary styles influence the film's notoriety in films. It has inspired countless producers, references, and discussions in popular culture symbolism. The extremity of cinematic experimentations and preliminary press serving as a cautionary tales about the parallels of artistic rubric and the moral dominance inherent in depicting extreme content about final reflections, art of ethical boundaries in cinema. Caligula challenged viewers to confront uncomfortable truth about power and morality is questions whether art should push boundaries at any cost or whether some boundaries are inevitable. Its mixture of visually beauty, visceral shocks, and philosophically undertones make it uniquely provocating piece. Okay, guys, I tell you this other, the most complete in depth and length analysis of Caligula's 1979 introduction, the genesis of cinema's enigma. Equal measure its production history alone reads like a saga, ambition, great artistic conflict, and ethical controversy conceived during the early 1970s, periods marked by socially upheavals, revolutions, and a challenge to traditional moral values. The film was envisioned as a groundbreaking fusion of historical epic and explicit adult content. The project was initially by Bob Justice, the flamboyant publishers of Penthouse in Magnus gives a goal was ambitious to create a film that would elevate adult cinema into the realm to high art challenging censorship and societal taboos. He envisioned devising historically authenticity despite of Caligula's regions enforced with explicit censor instead to shock and provoke. Eventually, the project was entrusted to Italian director Tinto Brass, known for his erotic film that combined aesthetic beauty with eroticism. Mirage aimed to craft a serious, visually opulent film rooted in historical authenticity. Our creative disagreement discussed obsessions with sensationalism and Vidai influence begins to discomfort the original visions, plugging to the project into Charles' core vital the renovate novelist was brought into write the screenplay and our creative decisions his environment influenced the film's philosophically themes of power, decadence, and plot and unapologetic and perfecting remaining. Caligula is lost based on historical accounts, but it takes significant liberties emphasizing sensationalism or accuracy to evoke visceral reaction. The narrative itself probably provoking the value of excess violence, of deliberate introduction and rise. The films begin with Caligula's ascent to power following death of Tiberius portrays as Christmas tree and with he intensely appears as promising ruler there, but quickly descends into tyrant. His rise here is marked by political manipulations and brutal considerations of power. The path into madness, Caligula's psychologically descends is depreciate thought, hallucinations, paranoia, and violent outbursts. His relationships become increasingly abused and incestuous, notably his relationship with his sister Eurycleia, who is portrayed as both his lover and confidant, exploit and access thought out. The film's Caligula includes is in orders, violence, BDSM, and encourages acts. The explicit scans are conflicting, often shot with voyeuristic intimacy, blurring the lines between art and exploitation. These scans serve both as depictions or decades and as critiques or explorations of absolute power, corruption, influence, downfall, and violence. The climax involves Caligula violent assassination depicted with brutal realism, and the aftermath shows socials of emphasizing the destructive consequences of his talent and madness themes. The narrative explores themes of absolute power, corruption, absolute certainty as a means of control, the chaos, madness as a consequence of decadence, and the blurred line between historical act and sensational fictional. The cast performance that shocks and mesmerizes Malcolm M.C. Dove as Caligula. His portrayal is raw, intense, and complex. Captures the tragic figures, tragic figures of rulers consumed by his own hubris, oscillating between charm and brutality. Treason and Sovel Drusilla, her performance explored vulnerability, seduction, and complexity in the dictation, making her one of the most discussed figures in the films. Peter O'Toole's as the probate, a brief but impactful role, a tool's characters providing philosophically Helen's Mirren and John's values both and their gravitas ethos overshadowed by the film's explicit content. Supporting cast a mixture of Europeans The contributing of the film's theatrical and mystical aesthetics, styles, and cinematic technique, visual and auditory feats, directions, and visual tenubras. As direction emphasizes opulence, sumptuous sets, elaborate costumes, and grand debuts about the decades of ancient Rome. The use of rich colors, detailed set designs, and theatrical staging creates a visually stunning environment that con- contrasts sharply with the explicit content cinematography. The cinematography employs swiping wide shots for grandeur, close-ups for intimacy, and stark lighting to heighten emotional and visceral impact. Scans are often composed like theatrical tableau, emphasizing the epically and theatrically of the narratives, music, and sound. The soundtrack combined periods music with discordant modern compositions, created an unsettling atmosphere that heightens the sob of explicit skins. The score underscores the themes of decadence, sound, and madness. Explicit content, the film's explicit skins depicting non-consolation, pain, and violence are shot with a clinical realism designed to provoke visceral reaction. These sketches are often controversial for their graphic nature and ethical implications. The controversy versus a global firestorm, Caligula became a cultural lightning rod, sparking outrage, censorship, and legal battles worldwide. Production scandal without consent. Some actors have spoken about discomfort and cursing during filming, especially regarding explicit scans. Legal disagreements over writing distributions and profit and and to length real lawsuits, directors and disavowing Tino Brass publicly disavowed much of the final cut, lamenting the loss of artistic control and integrity. Ethical elements exploration versus art debates rage over whether the explicit content served an artistic purpose or was merely sensationalism. Actors fall were conscripts about the treatment of actors, especially regarding scams of sexual violence and criticism perished. Thematic deconstructions, a deep dive, power and decades. The film portrays power as inherently corrupting. Caligula's unchecked authority leads to chaos, violence, and societal decay. Sexuality and control sexually act are depicted as tools of domination and power, draining pleasure with violence, illustrating power, corrupts self-madness and psychological decay. Cerebral mental deterioration reflects the destructive effect of absolute power and decades, symbolizing societal collapse, historical function, and censorship. While based on historical figures, the films exaggerate and sensationalize to evoke shock and controversy, blurring effect and fiction's societal decay. The decades despite reflect fears of societal collapse driven by moral decay and excess. Critical reception from outrage to cult initial reactions. The film was for its explicit content deemed immoral and exploitive. Later repurposed over time, Caligula gained a cult following, impressed for its audacity, visually style, and pro-action themes. Some scholars interpret it as a critique of tyrant as decadence, academic perspective, analyzing as an experimental transgressive works that challenge notice of morality, art, and censorship. Influence of cinema inspired later filmmakers in the transgressive and experimental genres, pushing boundaries of what is acceptable in mainstream cinema. Its enduring legacy, a cultural touchstone, Caligula remains a symbol of artistic hubris, censorship debates, and the extreme of cinematic expressions. Its troubled productions, controversial content, and cult status exemplify the complex relationship between art and morality. It has influenced countless works of cinema and pop culture, often cited as an example. The limit of artistic freedom and the dangers of unchecked ambition, ethical and philosophically reflections the boundary between art and exploitation. Caligula commits viewers to confront unforgettable questions. Does art have a moral responsibility to avoid gratuitous violence and sexuality? Can shocking content serve an artistic philosophy purpose? What are the ethical boundaries filmmakers nowadays how to society norms influence perceptions of art, the push limits, the film explicit scans and controversial themes silence viewers and critics like promoting ongoing debates about the role of cinema in comforting to a subject behind the scan's story and kudos actors discomfort several actors say spoken about feeling worried or uncomfortable during filming, especially during explicit scenes. And Theodorus has expressed regret about his participation. Scales of glorification human persist that some scales were added without actor full consent, raising ethical questions about exploitation. Uses obeisance the producer relentless pursuit of shock and spectacle often overruled artistic considerations leading to a fractured final productions. Brass disillusionment into brass was deeply disfigured with the final cut feeling that his artistic visions and been compromised by Zeus's extremist demands. Final Reflections, a controversial masterpiece or contemporary tale, Caligula remains provoking, polarizing film, an example of cinematic ambitions going away or hold critics of power and decadence. Its legacy endurance as a testament to the dangers and possibility of pushing artistic boundary whether regards as a misunderstood masterpiece, a failed experiment or a gracious exploration. Film Caligulas continues to stimulate debates about morality, art, and the limit of cinema. Its influence persists is discussions about censorship, artistic freedom, and the ethical censorship, ethical, artistic freedom of the responsibility of filmmakers. Most comprehensive in-depth and length analysis of Caligula 1979 Introduction The epic saga of a cinematic enigma. Caligula is arguably one of the most infamous films in cinematic history, a film that has sparked controversial press and revolutions in equal measure. Its story is as tumultuous as its content, marked by ambitious visions, financial chaos, creative conflict, ethical dilemmas, and societal debates about morality and artistic expansion. Conceived during a period of the early 1970s, Caligula emerged from the confluence of the revolution's anti-censorship movement and desires by certain filmmakers and producers to challenge social doubt, taboos. Its origins are rooted in the visions of Bob the flamboyant publishers of Phantoms magazine who sought to create a film that redefines adult cinema and opulent, provocating, and artistic. Conceived during a period of social upheaval, the early 1970s, Caligula emerges from the confluence of the revolution's anti-censorship movement and desires by certain filmmakers and producers to challenge societal taboo. Its origin rooted in the visions of Bob Gusius, the flamboyant publisher of Penthouse Images, who sought to create a film that would redefine adult cinema and opulent, provocative, and artificially ambitious project that would push the boundaries of what was acceptable in mainstream filmmaking. The project was entirely entrusted to Intento bears an Italian filmmaker renowned for his erotic and provocative films, Brass aimed for a serious, visually simultaneous historical epic rooted in authenticity. However, as productions progress, tensions arose between brass articles' sensibility and uses options with sensationalism into this cross was what core middle the celebration Americans novelistic and aesthetic, known for his sharp wit and biting social commentary. Interpretation and ethical controversy, the final product released 1979 became a cultural laughing rod and object of both admiration and acute outrage. Helen's notice of morality, free expression, and the power of cinema, the historical and cultural context, a world on the brink. Caligula was conceived during a time when society was questioning traditional moral, pushing against censorship and exploring the limit of artistic expression. The 1960s and early 1970s a wave of films challenged taboos such as Midnight County, Clockwork Organs, and Last Tango in Paris. These films aim to confront audience with raw, unfiltered depictions of human nature violence and power in this milieu. Jesus envisaged Caligula as the ultimate provocative film and artistic decadence and explicit portrayals of Roman imperial excess. The film was part of a broader movement to subvert censorship law and demarcations explicit content, making it accessible under the use of high art. Si- Simultaneous, the political climate was rife with unveiled wars, protest, social revolution, all of which contributed to a cultural atmosphere eager to challenge authority and norms. Caligula was both a product of and a reaction to his environment, a film designed to shock, provoke, and confound societal hypocrisies. The products change from visions to nightmare. It until concept and artistic goals. Pursue a vision was ambition, a lavish epic historical film rooted serious, almost theatrically, depictions of Colgo's ravings highlighting political intrigues, psychology, complexity, and moral ambiguity. The involvement of Gore Vidal's screenplay aimed to imbue the story with philosophical depth, exploring themes of power, corruption, madness, and decadence. Vidal's version was intended to be a serious historical drama with biting social commentary. However, his influence was gradually undermined as institutions and others sought to increase sensationalism, shifting creative control. Cooking a desire to include explicit sense of and violence, often to little and shock, classed with brass desires of aesthetic integrity. Scans were edited and reshots without brass approvals. Middle script were rewriting multiple times, sometimes with minimal regret for